You're listening to Rewritten Fates, a dark fantasy romance series. Book 1, The Condemned Duchess. Chapter 16, The Silver Awakening. For several seconds after the Saintess spoke, the corridor was a tomb. 2 bodies lay motionless on the marble, the copper tang of blood beginning to fill the air. The guards stood frozen, their halberds half raised, eyes darting between the dead assassins and the impossible sight at my feet. No one seemed quite certain what they were witnessing. Neither was I. The glow around my feet was soft at first, like moonlight reflected through deep water. But it didn't fade. Instead, it pulsed, brightening and dimming in a steady, rhythmic cadence that matched the frantic thudding of my heart. It wasn't just magic, it felt alive. In this world, magic was a spectacle of fire and light, a display of divine authority. But this was quiet, patient, like an ancient eye finally opening after centuries of sleep. The Saintess watched the glow with a hunger that made my skin crawl. Her mask of serenity had cracked, revealing a sharp, scholarly fascination. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with a terrifying sort of awe. "That confirms it." Alaric stepped in front of me, his shadow cutting through the silver light. His sword remained drawn, his knuckles white against the hilt. "You arranged an assassination to prove a theory," he said, his voice a low, dangerous vibration. The Saintess met his gaze without a hint of shame. "I arranged the truth, Duke. I allowed circumstances to reveal what your politics tried to hide." Alaric took a slow, predatory step closer. The guards shifted nervously, their boots scraping against the stone. "You gambled with her life in the king's own halls." And the power responded exactly as I suspected it would. She looked past Alaric, her eyes pinning me. "You feel it, don't you, Duchess? You aren't just carrying a spark. You are the fire." I looked down. The silver glow was no longer just a shimmer. It was spreading. Thin, luminous lines were snaking through the veins of the marble tiles like frost across a window pane. "What is happening to me?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "The Saintess Order spent 300 years trying to drown the silver bloodline in silence," Lyra said, her voice rising. "But blood has a long memory. You aren't just a woman anymore, Elara. You are a resurrection." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Several guards stepped back instinctively, one crossing himself with a trembling hand. "You're controlling it," Alaric murmured, glancing back at me. "I'm not doing anything, Alaric. It's just there." "No," he said, his eyes narrowing. "It's responding to you." I lifted my hands, and the silver light flickered between my fingers, a cold, liquid warmth that felt more natural than the air I was breathing. It wasn't a weapon, not yet, but it was a presence. "The silver bloodline has awakened," the Saintess declared, her voice echoing through the hall with the weight of a death sentence. "By nightfall, every noble in the capital will know. By tomorrow, the kingdom will be forced to choose between the light and the moon." Alaric did something then that made the entire corridor go still. He sheathed his sword with a sharp metallic clack and stepped beside me. He didn't hide me, he stood with me. "Duchess Elara remains under the protection of House Viremont," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of a sovereign decree. The Saintess's eyes flashed with a cold fire. "You would bind your ancient house to a heresy, Viremont? You would choose a ghost over the order?" "I choose my wife," Alaric said, and for the first time, the word didn't sound like a legal term. And I choose stability over the hysteria you are trying to ignite. For a long, agonizing moment, they stared at each other, faith and power balanced on the edge of a blade. Then Lyra stepped back, a small, calculated retreat. "Very well," she said softly. "If the Duke wishes to claim the Silver Goddess as his own, the court will allow it, for now. But remember, Duke, awakenings cannot be hidden, and they cannot be tamed." She turned and swept down the hall, her white robes trailing through the blood of the men she had sent to die. The corridor slowly exhaled. Servants rushed forward to clear the bodies, their faces pale and terrified. The story was already moving, spreading through the palace like a wildfire. The silver glow at my feet began to fade, retreating back into my skin, leaving behind a lingering, restless heat. Alaric looked down at me, his face a mask of grim determination. "The kingdom will not ignore this, Elara. By tonight, you will be the most feared woman in the north." I looked at my hands. The silver was gone, but the sensation remained, an unfinished sentence, a door left ajar. "I think," I said softly, "that's exactly what the story wanted." Alaric studied me for a long moment, then reached out, his gloved hand briefly brushing mine. "Whatever this power is, you won't face it alone. I've repositioned the board, but I won't let you be the sacrifice." Outside the windows, the late afternoon sky was bruising into a deep purple. A storm was rolling in from the mountains, heavy with the promise of rain and thunder. I looked out at the darkening horizon and realized something chilling. The original story was dead. The Villainess was gone, and in her place, something far more dangerous had begun to breathe. The end of Book 1. Rewritten Fates, The Condemned Duchess, Sneak Peek. Book 2, The Awakening Crown. The palace had never been this quiet. It wasn't the peace of a sleeping household or the calm of a summer night. It was the breathless, suffocating hush that precedes a hurricane. I stood alone on the balcony, my fingers gripping the cold stone rail as I looked out over the kingdom of Valareth. Below, thousands of lanterns flickered in the sprawl of the capital, their golden glow scattered across the dark landscape like fallen stars. Just days ago, I was a woman marked for the pyre, a condemned duchess with 48 hours of breath left in her lungs. Now, everything had shifted. The wind caught the strands of my hair, shimmering silver now, sending them dancing across my shoulders like ghosts. I closed my eyes and inhaled the biting night air, trying to stifle the restless, humming energy stirring beneath my skin. The magic hadn't faded after the trial. If anything, it had taken root. A soft silver pulse throbbed at my fingertips, barely visible against the velvet black of the night. It felt sentient now, aware of itself, watching the world through my eyes. And that awareness terrified me. Slow, measured footsteps vibrated through the stone floor behind me. I didn't need to turn to know the rhythm of that stride. Duke Alaric Viremont. His presence had become a physical weight in the air, like the charged tension of a storm cloud rolling over the horizon. "You should not be standing out here alone," he said. His voice was a low velvet rasp, carrying that effortless authority that made armies halt in their tracks. I opened my eyes and turned my head just enough to see him. He stood framed in the archway, half swallowed by the shadows of the bedchamber. Tall, broad-shouldered, His dark military coat was cut with the lethal precision of a man who had spent his life preparing for the end of the world. Tonight, however, his molten gold eyes weren't cold. They were searching. "You're worried," I said. It wasn't a guess. It was a reflection of the vibration in the air. Alaric stepped out onto the balcony, the amber candlelight from the room spilling across his boots. "I am thinking," he countered, "that is usually worse." A faint, weary smile touched my lips. "Thinking about what, Alaric?" For a moment he remained silent. His gaze dropped to my hands, watching the faint silver vapors curling around my fingers. The magic flared in response to his proximity, pulsing brighter as if reaching for him. "You felt it too," he said. The words were quiet, but they landed with the weight of a stone dropped into a sunless well. My stomach tightened. "Felt what?" Alaric's expression darkened, the shadows of the balcony carving deep hollows into his face. The shift! The wind swept across the stone again, turning jagged and cold. Below us, somewhere in the labyrinthine streets of the city, a bell tolled. Clang, then again. Clang. It wasn't the melodic chime of the temple marking the hour. It was the frantic, rhythmic iron shriek of a warning bell. Alaric's head snapped toward the city, his jaw tightening. "Trouble," I whispered. "More than trouble." His voice had gone deathly still, the silence of a predator mid-hunt. The Saintess has begun moving her forces. She is mobilizing the High Guard. My pulse hammered against my ribs. "That fast? The king gave us 2 days." "She no longer cares what the king gave us," he said, his gaze returning to me, sharp and predatory. "You are no longer just a condemned duchess to her, Elara. You are an existential threat." The way he said my name sent a strange liquid warmth through my chest, clashing with the ice in my veins. "Then what am I?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the rising wind. He hesitated, the space between us charged with more than just magic. Finally, he spoke, his voice a grim vow. "You are the spark that is going to burn her kingdom to the ground." The wind abruptly died. The silence was absolute. And then the silver magic in my hands erupted. It wasn't a soft glow this time. It was a violent, blinding burst of lunar fire that turned the balcony to midday. We both froze, the light reflecting in the gold of his eyes. For the first time, the power didn't feel like a part of me. It felt like it was responding to something ancient, something calling from the dark. Alaric's eyes widened, his hand instinctively moving toward the hilt of his blade. "Elara," he said slowly, "what did you just do?" I stared at my glowing skin, the light now crawling up my arms like molten mercury. I didn't do anything." The silver continued to spread, turning my skin to shimmering fire. And then, somewhere deep beneath the palace, far below the marble halls and the gilded cages, something ancient finally exhaled. The warning bells in the city began to ring faster, a frantic, dissonant chorus. A low, guttural rumble echoed beneath our feet. It was the sound of mountains moving, stone grinding against stone, the sound of a door that had been sealed for 1,000 years finally being forced off its hinges. I looked up at him, my heart slamming against my teeth. "Alaric, what temple is under this palace?" But Alaric wasn't looking at me. He was staring past the balcony toward the heart of the capital, toward the great cathedral of the Saintess. The fear in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. It was a look I had never seen on the great general's face before. The war for Valareth hadn't just begun. I had just summoned it. End of Book 1. Rewritten Fates. The Condemned Duchess. A new chapter of the story continues in Book 2. The Awakening Crown. But in the royal court, nothing is ever truly over. Secrets move in the shadows, and every choice rewrites fate. Continue the story in the next episode of Rewritten Fates, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.